simpler just by setting up.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Planning Commission meeting for Saratoga Springs. Today is Thursday, September 28th. We're going to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. We've asked Nora Shepard to lead us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Nora. Before we take roll call, I would like to make an announcement. Mike McComber's mother recently passed away, so I wanted to make that available to you. Okay, let's have roll call. We'll start over on this side.
Sandra Steele,
Brianna Brush.
Brian Chapman,
Kirk Wilkins.
Ken Kilgore,
Troy Cunningham,
Hayden Williamson,
And city staff.
Gordon Miner,
Thank you, and we do have a quorum. Okay, so this is a public meeting. If you have any thoughts or ideas or concerns that you'd like to come forward and bring before the city, we invite you to come forward now and spend about 3 minutes. If it's not on the agenda, that's right. Okay, since nobody would like to see anything, we will close public comment at this time, and we'll move on to item number 4. This is a public hearing. It's a rezone, a general plan amendment, and concept plan for Sailhouse Cove, located at 4144 South Redwood Road. Ridgepoint Management Group, LLC is the applicant. We'll turn the time over to Nora Shepard for the presentation.
Okay, good evening. This is Sailhouse Cove, which is a request for a general plan amendment, rezone, and concept plan. And its general location is way south. Some of you folks may have been on the Planning Commission when this came previously. I'll talk a little bit about, what I will talk about is I'll give you some background on how it got to be zoned what it is today, what they are proposing, and some options for you in terms of action. And then I'll turn it over to the applicant, and it's their job to advocate for the rezone and for the general plan amendment, and so they will be doing that. So here is an area map that just shows the planned and existing subdivisions. The big colorful one is Toguayo, which is still a ways off, but they do have an approved master development agreement. And we have been having some discussions with folks about Toguayo. We have those on and off. Outlined in red is the Sailhouse Cove. Just north is property that is developed or proposed to be developed, and also across the street, as you can see, to the south is all vacant land right now. So here's a zoning map. Right now, the existing zoning is mixed waterfront. That's the land use, I'm sorry. The existing land use is outlined in your newly adopted general plan. Is mixed waterfront along the shore and low-density residential. And then the zoning map shows it to be rural residential right now. Just to the north is R110. There's some R19, and then the planned community is the big Toguayo property, which has a variety of uses. It's a really large property. And to the south is agricultural. So a little background. In 2014, this property was owned agricultural, and in 2014, an application came through for a rezone to rural residential. And it was 41 1-acre single-family parcels. And the proposal was that it would be sewered by septic tanks. And because the city was not prepared to serve sewer down this far at that point in time, and because it was a different product We don't really have too many 1 acre, we don't have much of this zoning in Saratoga Springs, and I think the thought was that providing opportunity for 1 acre lots was something that Saratoga Springs was interested in. So it was looked upon favorably by the Planning Commission, the City Council. I have attached the City Council minutes to your staff report. So the request now is to do a general plan amendment to remove the mixed waterfront and the waterfront overlay zones, and they will talk about that a little bit. To rezone from rural residential, the 1 acre lots, to low density residential, or R1 10,000 square foot minimums. And then a concept plan for 130 lot subdivision on the 58 acres. A concept plan is really just that, and they don't need to receive any kind of approval or recommendation on the concept plan, but if you have comments, we'd be happy to hear them, and then if and when they move forward, we can incorporate those comments into the concept plan. So there are a number of issues for discussion that are raised in the staff report. In the staff report, there's an analysis as to how the proposed plan does and does not meet the existing general plan, and also the existing zoning, and shows findings to change the zoning, the findings that are required in order to change the zoning and to change the land use designation in the general plan. So at the time, a little bit about the land use and density, which is really what I'd like you to kind of focus on a little bit, and what I'd like to hear the most feedback on is, at the time of the rezone to rural residential, as I mentioned, the city was excited to be able to offer that product in the city. And so I think it was pretty fully supported by the city council. The R110, as I mentioned, is inconsistent with the general plan in that the general plan shows mixed waterfront in that area, and the proposal right now is all R110 without any mixed waterfront at all. And this area is one of the few opportunities for mixed waterfront in the city. We don't really have that much left where we would have an opportunity to develop mixed waterfront. So this is the concept plan that's being proposed, 148 lots on, and there's some technical issues that have to be dealt with. They need an additional access point onto Redwood. They need an additional access point to the south. So there's some technical issues that engineering has provided. But this is basically the concept plan. And this was the concept plan that was approved in 2014. It actually received preliminary plan approval, but that approval, preliminary plat approval, but that approval has expired. So all they have at this point is the zone. So the other issue for discussion is the sewer service. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this. Gordon is here to help me with this, and Mark as well. In 2014, the plan proposed septic systems because we were not prepared to provide sewer service to that area right now, or at that time. And the city there have been discussions back and forth with our engineer and with the engineers who are doing our capital facilities planning, and with the engineer for the project, that shows that there may be adequate capacity within our existing sewer system to accommodate this. More detailed work is necessary on it, but our current capital facilities plan shows that this area would not be served by city sewer at this time. Now the capital facilities plan is undergoing a revision right now, and we expect them to look at these kinds of things and our capacities given what's gone in, and some of the changes that have happened in the city, and that's due to come out sometime this fall. So hopefully that document will give us some guidance. In addition to Guayo, that big colorful development has a lot of units in it, and they are well aware that we will not be able to service that with our existing sewer capacity. And there have been some preliminary discussions about them providing sort of an auxiliary, ancillary sewer system, what they call these sometimes is package plants, but they're smaller systems for, the development itself. So there could be some possibility that in the future, this area could attach to that plant if it ever happens. I think that's a ways off, but there have been on and off discussions with folks. So the options as outlined in the staff report include a negative recommendation, primarily because it's inconsistent with the general plan and is not consistent with section 191704 of the code as articulated in the staff report and any other findings you might feel appropriate. Forward a positive recommendation to the City Council, and this would be on both the general plan and the rezone. And the findings you have to make deal with its conformity to the land use element and other provisions of the general plan. The only way you could find that is if you're okay with getting rid of the mixed waterfront and waterfront overlay zone. So you have to make specific findings for the zoning change and the general plan change. And then option 3 would be to continue this. If you feel you need some additional information before you're ready to take an action, you can direct us to dig up that information and bring it back to you so you could continue the item and continue the public hearing if you wish. Any preliminary questions before we turn it over to the applicants?
Thank you, Nora, for your presentation.
All yours.
If the applicant would like to come and join us, you can come take a seat if you like. And those of you that are joining us, if you could tell us your name and address for the record.
Ben Lakey for Ridgepoint Management, 949 South, 200 East, Orem, Utah.
Hi, Ben.
Mike Carlton from Wilding Engineering, 14721 South, Heritage Crestway in Bluffdale.
Thank you. Ben and Mike, would you like to add anything to the presentation that's been given tonight?
Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your time. I did want to make one quick, somewhat relevant point that was erroneous, I think, in the original report, is that I think the concept that we've submitted is 137 lots. I just wanted to clarify that, and not 131 lots. We are asking for a recommendation of approval for the general plan amendment, as well as for a conditional approval of the rezone, conditioned upon, obviously, the sewer being able to be serviced to the property. As far as the rest of the requirements for engineering and things for the development to meet code, that's something that we can address at preliminary approval stage, and obviously will ensure that any development that we do does meet all the code requirements. The main reason why we think this is appropriate to amend the general plan, so our initial incentive in forwarding this proposal is that currently the rural residential use doesn't fall in line with the low density plan in the general plan. And on top of that, while it is a unique product that could be brought to the market, we feel like with Guayo to the south, which has a wide variety of products, as well as the R19 and R110 to the north, it feels inconsistent with us to go from a 10,000 square foot lot abruptly to a 1 acre lot and then back to a mixed multiple different product types to the south. And that's why we feel like something needs to be done to help to blend a little bit better. And the reason why we're requesting that the general plan be amended to lift the lakefront mixed use, and to be clear, what we think that means is we think that it's a difference of about 2.2 acres of commercial. So if we fell in line perfectly with the general plan as it currently sits, we would probably give up 8 or 9 lots, maybe 10 lots, and we would have 2.2 acres of commercial. from a marketing standpoint, which is obviously where we start from, we know that's not where you start from. We can't find a good use for that. We can't find a use that would bring people down to the lake in this far, far south development in the city that would bring people to the lakefront for 2.2 acres of commercial. There's no traffic there. And furthermore, in the Parks and Rec master plan, the respondents to the survey in the city responded that the number one thing that they wanted most in the city was more usable parks within the city. And that's what we've tried to focus on in this concept is, and in our zone, it would require it with some of the new requirements in the newly passed regulations, that we would have a splash pad and a lot of open space down by the lake. We feel like that would be a better community use, to have some of that open space to bring people down to the lake and have them have access to use that in a usable way, as opposed to commercial. Some of the other reasons that we have is there's actually 2 parcels north of where we're at along Geneva Road. There's about a 2-acre, it's in the Pelican Cove. Is that what it's called, Pelican Cove? The one with the,
Saratoga Road.
along, yeah. I believe it's called the Pelican Cove development. It was initially started about 10 years ago. There's about 2 acres of commercial on the corner of Redwood that has been sitting vacant with a for sale sign in front of it for 10 years. Precisely because the issue that we have is that we can't find a valuable use. But certainly if the commission felt that it was inappropriate to recommend approval of the general plan amendment, we would request that you forward a recommendation of approval contingent upon meeting that requirement to fully fulfill the mixed use requirement of having, I believe it's 2.2 acres of commercial use. I believe that's the primary reasons that we wanted to present to the commission. Are there any particular questions at this time? And I know there were some questions about engineering issues and sewer issues. At this time, it seems that the city engineer's studies indicate that there is capacity. But once again, I think that that's something that we can have an approval conditioned upon sufficient sewer. Obviously, we'll never be able to build the development without sewer. We'll never be able to get plat approval because there's no sewer, there's no sewer. So we feel like it's appropriate to recommend an approval contingent upon whatever facilities master plan amendment needs to occur in order that we'll have sewer to service these homes. Are there any questions at this time?
So what we'll do is we'll open this up to public comment, and then we'll turn it over to the planning commission.
Sure.
But if you're done with your presentation? Okay.
No.
Anything else? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
For your comments. We will open this up. This is a public meeting. We're going to open it up to the public hearing for item number 4, the rezone general plan amendment and concept plan for Sail House Cove. If you have any comments about that, we invite you to come forward at this time. Okay, given that there aren't any, we will close public comment and we'll turn the time over to the planning commission for comment. Anyone? Commissioner Steele.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. What is the notch that's at the lake, that's the little notch out of that? Is that privately owned? Is there a house on it?
I am not absolutely sure about that.
It's privately owned.
It's privately owned,
People to the north own it.
that little notch right there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a house on it? No, so it's vacant. It's owned by parcel to the north. Lighthouse Cove.
But that has expired, hasn't it?
That's the owner.
Okay, but
It's the same owner.
okay.
It is zoned, the parcel to the north, not that little notch, but the rest of it is zoned R110.
We spent so much time talking about mixed waterfront and getting the requirements for it that I can't support not having it. And if you take into account the property to the north, I believe that has the mixed waterfront on it also. And then anything that comes into the south will probably have the mixed waterfront. If you got all of that in, then you could have a really nice waterfront development. So I cannot support changing the general plan to eliminate that on your property. I realize it's premature right now, and I understand where you're coming from, but if we let this go by, then the next people are going to come in and say, well, we don't have enough acreage, and it really won't work, and all of a sudden we have lost everything. And at this point in our city's history, I don't think we want to do that.
Sure, still. I addressed the general plan just briefly here. It's okay with the...
Please proceed.
So this is in Utah Code 10-9A-405, talks about general plans and the effect that a general plan has. And it states that a general plan is an advisory guide for land use decisions, the impact of which shall be determined by ordinance. Now, in our ordinance, we have also made the general plan an advisory document. So what that means is, sure, it has the Lake Shore designation right now in the general plan, but the zoning would take precedence over that general plan designation. Zoning right now is rural residential, which allows the 1 acre lots without any commercial component of that.
Right.
Now, if you were to make a decision as far as rezoning the property to a lower or higher density, I should say, then you would look at the general plan and making that decision. Hopefully the general plan would be used as a tool to help guide you and advise you, and at least advise the council in making a decision. Right now, under the rural residential zone, there would not be a binding requirement to have the commercial component.
Right.
So if they were to develop under the current zoning, they would not have to develop commercial property.
Right.
So there's been a little bit of confusion, I think, about what, the binding effect of the general plan or the designation that it has under the general plan at this point. I wanted to clear that, that up.
The way I understand it, right now they have rural residential, and that's what is in place right now. They are coming in and asking us to give them more density and then to eliminate having to have the mixed waterfront. And if the sewer were in place today, I might be persuaded to zone the western part, the part that's not mixed waterfront, to R10. But on the other hand, I would have the argument with myself, we don't have any 1 acre lots in our city or any subdivision of such. And it is a unique opportunity for people to have more land. And yes, it's been there and not been developed. We don't know. What if you did develop it and you could sell every one of them right away? We changed our plan or our engineering standards to be able to have septic tanks on that. We also changed our road sections so that there wouldn't have to be any sidewalks. And so my leaning right now is we're going to see higher density across the street, and that's going to provide a lot of people. And so I'd like to keep the rural residential. I can't think about rezoning and then doing away with the mixed waterfront. That I just can't support that at all.
Commissioner Steele, before we move on, can you provide anywhere in the code that that doesn't support that?
No.
Any references? Okay.
Yeah, right now, it's rural residential with no requirement for mixed waterfront, but you're right, they are asking for a change, and often when when somebody's looking for a change in zoning, you refer to your general plan, and while it's advisory in nature, it is what it is, and that's been a recent discussion.
Commissioner Chapman.
Yeah, if the general plan is an advisory document, why do we have an amendment before us?
It's good practice to have a general plan and a zoning code that are in sync with each other. While it may not be required by law necessarily in this state, it's good practice to have them consistent, especially because you just redid your general plan. It was adopted in June or July, very recently. So that presumes that, you're looking toward the future, and that's what you'd like to see in the future.
Isn't the reason why we had the amendment before us is because the applicants are asking for a change in the
Yes.
currently zoned land use?
Correct.
So it's not the general plan that's the issue, it's the fact that it's currently residential, a rural residential, and they want something different.
No, I understand, but if the general
there's an
plan is just an advisory document, why do we have to worry about an amendment at all?
No, because
Probably don't
we
absolutely
don't,
have to.
but it's already zoned to something different.
Well, I can point to the specific reference in the city code that discusses that, but it does say that the city council, in making determination about rezoning the property, shall consider the recommendations in the general plan. There's several sections that discuss that, so you would look at that. They're in here asking for a rezone, as well as the general plan amendment, so that when it is in fact, or if it is in fact rezoned, you're not looking at that general plan. And I agree with Nora, it's good for consistency purposes. But if you were to look at what the code says when you're considering that rezone, and you have to consider the recommendations in the general plan, that presents an opportunity. It's just not consistent. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense if you have a general plan recommendation that's completely disregarded. Certainly can, but it makes sense, and it's a best practice to go ahead and change the general plan along with the zoning.
So using the general plan as an advisory document, I would have to agree with a lot of what Commissioner Steele has said, where if we are rezoning or asking to forward a positive recommendation for a rezone from rural residential to an R110, where the general plan stipulates that as mixed waterfront, that should be a serious consideration to uphold. That document and the thought and the vision that went into that document for the future of the city was not something that was taken lightly. And while it isn't binding, it may be an advisory thing, I find it problematic to disregard that and not potentially not take it as seriously as I think the thought and planning that went into that. I know this is a concept plan. I would just recommend on where it shows the neighborhood, the road going from Redwood. I'm assuming those first 6 houses do not have driveways on that road.
You talking about the lots that are backing onto Redwood Road there?
No, as you turn in from Redwood Road onto that
So they'd be
main center street.
rear loaded.
Yeah.
Lot 9, 10, 63, 64, 138,
None of those face
122.
that road, is that correct?
If I owned one of those lots, I wouldn't want to face that. I would want to face the road in front of
streets.
you, because that's where all my neighbors would be facing. But that would be something that would be stipulated by the plat, that could
Sure.
have a note on the
Okay.
plat for that.
Just going back a little bit to the rezone, I do like the idea, or if there's some sort of way you can, there's a, the west side, to maintain some sort of that mixed waterfront. I like the idea of having accessible open space by the lake. It'd be interesting to see what that entailed a little more. Is this actually accessing the lake, or is it trails by the lake, or is it a park? Do you guys have any idea what you were?
There is actually, and I could probably pull it up. They had a second sheet which talked about the open space amenities that they were looking at, and I think it was, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, like a gazebo, picnic tables. They have to provide the 2 trails, the waterfront trail and the Redwood Road Trail. So those are They have to do that no matter what they do with this
Sure.
property, and they acknowledge that. So it does include some of those some playground equipment.
But no actual access to the
Splash
lake?
pad. Not, well.
Did you ask, is there access to the lake?
Yeah, I mean, is that
there's-
part of the consideration, is actual access to the lake?
Yeah, there was a hard trail that went from our most easternmost road down to the big 12-foot trail that runs along the lake.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the bottom right-hand picture of the picture, you can see it there. That's where it is, and there's a trail coming off of that.
There's
It looks like a little
10
road.
Yeah.
parking spaces. And
As if the road continued, but it turns into a little trail that leads down to the trailhead
So
down
the-
by the
yeah, on the
lake.
bottom right, there's that little area, there's a detention pond, which they may or may not be required to do. That would be, again, further discussion with the city engineer. But then there's a little area just to the west of that, is their little recreation amenity.
Sure, I was more referring to, is there a beach going in where people can actually access the water, or is there, a kayak ramp or anything like that, where people could actually get into the water from that trail? Or that
Not
space?
currently proposed anything formal, but certainly, we could look at the concept plan if it moves past this stage to incorporate some of that kind of amenity.
To me, something like that would be important, especially if we're sacrificing mixed waterfront, to still maintain the lake as a, unique part of our city. Something like that, I think, should be a consideration.
could we have some clarification on the R110? How many lots per acre is that?
Well, we don't really do lots per acre anymore. We have a minimum square footage. And it comes out to like 2.85 or just under 3 units per acre usually, once you include all the roads and the trails and things like that.
It's essentially our old R4, correct?
The old R3 probably is closer.
R3, that's what I meant, yeah, our old R3, yeah. Okay. Is there an HOA plan for this, or do you have have you decided on whether there's going to be an HOA for the parcel?
We haven't looked into it a lot. It seems fairly likely that at least some of the open space is going to be required to be maintained by an HOA, so there's a good chance that there will be an HOA.
Okay.
Yeah,
But it hasn't been determined.
probably.
The reason I ask is I live in a HOA with waterfront property as well, and in fact, there's a trail that runs from the lake side, and it just happens to turn up right onto my home's property, and so the trail runs right in front of my house. And to say that that's publicly available is really not true at all, because it's in an HOA, and so you don't have the public coming into the HOA in order to access the lake. So I don't find it to be really something that's public, it's available for the people who live there, but it's not really something that would be an amenity for the city. And so that kind of gets me back to what the other commissioners are saying about the mixed waterfront use. I don't think anyone really cares how much but how much effort went into studying other cities' waterfronts and their successes and failures and such. But the point is that the findings were that we had maybe, I don't know if you could say that we had made mistakes early on in the city planning, but we certainly did maybe give away a lot of the usable waterfront property that could have been enjoyed by all citizens. And so I think that's why I'm also not in favor of making a decision that precludes having a waterfront overlay. So that's where I'm leaning right now. I have some questions about the sewer. I think, Nora, you did answer a lot of my questions, but I just wanted to clarify. So you said something about the sewer capital facilities plan being available probably in this fall? Is that?
I'm gonna let Gordon talk
Okay.
about
Is
this
that when
stuff.
the city council will be able to see? Is it
Yes.
expected to be sometime this fall?
Yes.
Okay. Just wondering, it may be just too soon then, but as far as the city's budget for sewer, for sewer expenditures, is this area one of the high priority areas, or is the city looking at investing sewer budget somewhere else before we get to this, to this region, this area?
No, it wouldn't require significant system improvements to service this area. Preliminary calculations say that it's probably possible, but would still need to update the sewer master plan as part of this.
If I could, a few years ago, and it could be more than a few and closer to like 5 years ago, if I recall correctly, when we did Beacon Point, the council amended our service area and showed our service area ending at about Beacon Point. And so there's some technical questions, but there's also some other issues with the sewer system that we need to address. And frankly, it'll just be done as part of that master plan update. And so I'd love to rush it, but I think that there's a lot of things that we need to consider. We are working with the consultant at this point, and so we'll bring those back to, the appropriate bodies once that's completed.
Yeah, they're really, when you deal with all the capital facilities, those are policy issues that the council really has to grapple with and decide where they want to spend the money and, what's most important and all those kinds of things. And that's why we take these things back through amendments to them, back to them every once in a while as conditions firm up on the ground in reality.
Well, and I think that's really important, because if we were to conditionally approve the application, or make a recommendation to approve the application, and the condition being on the sewer capital facilities plan being finished, then if for whatever reason the priorities on that for spending ends up being north of the city, northern part of the city or somewhere else, then the application is moot.
Well, as I mentioned, we're not talking about capital improvements. We're talking about other parameters in the plan that need to be reviewed by the council.
Yeah, well, and whatever the decision ends up becoming.
But that's the way I've structured the recommendation for approval, is that there would be a condition that that would have to occur before they could actually get the rezone recorded.
Okay. Also, you showed what the zones north and south of the parcel are. Because I was wondering if, by making a decision here, for example, to grant the application, and therefore there will be no mixed waterfront, then that also probably decides what happens north and south of them as well.
It could. North and south is also mixed waterfront. And Dave, I don't know if you want to pull up the bigger picture zoning map that shows how the extent of that mixed waterfront. That would be helpful.
Because I think what the applicant said about, excuse me, there being another parcel nearby that's supposed to be commercial and it's not, and it hasn't been developed, that's a real, that's a real issue and concern. But I think minimizing or reducing the waterfront acreage is not necessarily the way to address that problem.
I think another thing that would be helpful for the Planning Commission to understand is no matter what zone they're in.
Can you go to the
still required to put in,
land use?
They're still required to put in the Lakeshore Trail.
Yes.
So that's across the city, and then there also is on the Redwood Road frontage improvements, the approved cross-section drawings that our engineering department has, that would also include the Redwood Road Trail. So those trails will go in regardless of what the zone is.
Yeah.
Now the rural residential zone doesn't have an open space requirement. So there wouldn't be additional open space that would be dedicated to the city or deeded to not deeded, but managed and maintained by a homeowners association. So the trails would still be in place for the code.
In the staff packet, so in the page, I call it page 8 and page 10, there were the two maps, and I don't know, I didn't understand how they relate, but one of them had no access or only one access to Redwood Road, and the other one looked like it had two, so.
Well, and there were two plans. One was the plan that was approved in 2014.
Okay.
Which showed the
1 acre
the 1
parcels.
acre lots. And the other one was the current proposed plat, which currently shows one access to Redwood Road.
Was it only one? Yeah, okay.
That's the old one.
Yeah, that's the old one.
Right, and the new one also shows one access, but we may, with that kind of density, we may want to look at two.
Okay.
And certainly another access point to the south.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, or one question about the sewage package treatment plant. Is that something the city would be maintaining and putting in, or is that something the developer's going to put in and then city maintaining? How is that going to work?
Mark, do you want to answer that? My understanding is that it would be developed by the developers of Toguayo or
The packaging
whatever,
plant.
the package plant, yeah.
Yeah, so that is about a $24 million issue for this particular area. As we were recently discussing with Toguayo, it was a desire to build a packaging plant. There's a couple challenges with what we're doing on the south end of the city. We're having to treat our effluent with different chemicals because it becomes I don't know the chemical term, sulfuric acid basically, as it goes through the pipes, and it's corroding the pipes basically between our city and the sewer treatment plant. Because it's such a long pump for our infrastructure and our effluent, it's just causing a lot of long-term maintenance issues. And so at TSSD, we're even having the capital conversation as part of the TSS, the Special Service District. We're having the conversation about what do we do going forward because these lines are just deteriorating quite quickly. So it is it's an important issue. It's a long-term issue. It's very expensive for us to run sewer lines, obviously, from the south end of the city to the TSSD discharge point, which would be something to the tune of about 5.5 miles through a series of lift stations. But then from there, you still have a 15-mile journey over to Linden, basically, where it's ultimately treated. And so it would be a requirement of TSSD's development. Obviously, they would be looking for credits. However, there's some technical issues associated with that. Like, for example, as soon as you're part of the city, you're joined into the TSSD district. And we've heard from them, some pushback from them saying, great, the city needs to maintain and operate this plant. Well, what's the purpose of being part of a district if we're having to do it? The other part of the issue is we're not sure that the state would permit it if we, as the city, were running the packaging plant. And so there's some technicalities that we have to work through with the Special Service District on a packaging plant. Now, as Gordon has indicated, there may be an opportunity for this to be able to hit our current lift stations and to go through the existing line. We have to make some service decisions, and we have to look at some other things as part of our holistic master plan in order to be able to determine that. In theory, if Toguayo were building tomorrow, or if that plant were built tomorrow, we'd much rather sewer that to the south to a packaging plant because you need a certain amount of effluent before it becomes it's the economy of scale argument, before it becomes viable to even operate a plant such as that. Toguayo has 4,500 homes. They were looking at doing some additional annexations down in that area, getting us up to about 6,500 homes. Well, and this kind of ties back to your commercial questions earlier. We have 7,000 residents in the city right now. So the whole concept of us being able to sustain commercial and things like that on the south end of the city, at some future point, there will be a need for that. There will be a need for some of these other things. It's just not today. So whole lot of parts going into it. I apologize, I've gone longer than you probably wanted on sewer, but it's not just a quick, easy question.
Actually, no,
please
you
go
aren't,
on.
because I spent a good portion of the afternoon looking at the Timpanogos Service District website and where they service, and I looked up the packaging plant stuff. So it's kind of interesting me, especially for the future of the city, because it looks to me like the service district ends well before the end of Saratoga Springs.
It actually is all of Saratoga Springs. Anything that's annexed into Saratoga Springs is part of the TSSD.
And I also noticed that downtown Eagle Mountain is not part.
Correct. And that's one of those philosophical questions that I brought to the board, which is, if you're expecting us to run a packaging plant, it should be run by the district. It's a permitting issue, and I'm new on the board, so I don't quite understand it all, but in theory, everybody is supposed to be going to TSSD or one of the existing permitted treatment facilities. But Teguayo is a prime example. It doesn't make sense for us to run, 20 miles or 18 miles worth of pipe in order to upsize all the capacity and infrastructure over to the sewer district when they're going to have to upsize the sewer district at some point in the future anyway. Why not just build a plant here, save all of the cost of 20 miles worth of pipeline, easement, roadway repair, all of those things, and treat on site in the south end of the city. And so, part of that question as we get further into it will be, do we take and turn the pump that currently sends everything to the north, do we take and turn it so that that comes back down to the packaging plant in the south, which actually would create an enormous capacity in that lift station. But those are all master planning things that, Gordon and I are just starting to have the nerd engineering conversations on, and it's going to ultimately, it's going to shape our future, but there's some questions that are going to have to be answered by the state permitting, the service district, if they'll participate, if we can get licensed to do it, if they can get licensed to do it, and all of those types of issues.
Thanks. A couple other things that I had, just general comments about the development. I think the city's recommendation for 2 entrances in from Redwood Road, I think that's going to be a must for me to see in order to move this forward in the future. And just for emergency services access, if nothing else. And if we had to ever evacuate this, all those residents having to go out one road on Redwood, I think that's problematic. And I think a southern stub to whatever goes into below would be also a good idea. So it sounds like the park, I'm kind of concerned. I know everybody loves splash pads. I'm not among them. I think they're problematic. If I don't know if this park is probably going to be too small for the city to maintain. So I think it might be maybe too expensive for an HOA to maintain, especially one of only 137 homes. That might break their budget. But yes.
It has 40, the townhomes, 43. Right. They're responsible for it.
So it would work then? Not working because they can't afford to fix it, or not working because it's just the time of year.
True.
I still don't like them.
Yeah, that one hasn't been turned over to the HOA yet, so it's still on the developer, and they're working through the health department on the splash pad and how it functions.
There's other problematic things with splash pads, so cost is not my main.
Well, right, and I think when you're looking at an HOA and what it costs to run those, there is a sort of a lower limit on the number of homes. I don't know exactly what that number is, but I know that there is a number that is beneficial as far as spreading costs, but I don't know what that is.
Okay. And the other thing is, I'm a fan, I really would like to see the lakefront and our waterfront preserved. We've lost so much of it. I'm afraid if we make an exception here, it's going to be like a zipper effect, and we'll lose the rest of it. So I also feel that it sounds like there's enough going into the sewer that I don't think you'll be able to start building homes really soon. It may be some time out. So we'll probably have other residents in there, and I think the mixed waterfront would eventually be able to work. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Cunningham.
I'll be a little bit of a broken record here. So I'm guessing, if you do end up going with R10, R110 rezone here, it's going to be a little bit of a long play for you anyway, just because of the sewer and whatnot. Your only chance of really having a quick turnaround on these would be going with the 1 acre lots. I'm guessing the reason you're not wanting to do 1 acre is just it's not a viable product for you. As much as we'd love to have that in the city, what we want and what the market supports is not always the same thing. With that being said, I understand the mixed waterfront may not seem viable right now, but at the same time, our goal is to kind of look out for the long-term interests of the city, and I know your guys' goal is to look for, quick turnaround on profit, and I get that, and I appreciate it. As such, I feel like I would be more than happy to support a rezone to meet the master plan. That would give you many more units, make it much more commercially viable for you, and in return, I'd feel like we'd like to just ask for a couple acres to be set aside for some waterfront businesses and whatnot. And I think you kind of answered part of your question in that people coming down there for business may not be the best, or people may not currently do that, but with some amenities like the ones you proposed, you could start drawing some traffic down there that would then be able to take advantage of the commercial aspects you have. That in conjunction with the future growth of Tecawayo and everything else that's going in down there, I think might make that area very commercially viable and give you the opportunity to really make some good money on those mixed waterfront amenities at some point in the future. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I hope we can come up with you guys can come up with a plan here that works for us and allows you guys to make buttloads of money, and you can walk away and go swim in big swimming pools of it. So, thanks.
Others?
I do. I have a question and then a couple comments. So in the concept plans for the 1 acre lot concept plan, there's no park planned? Okay. And then I won't repeat what everyone else has already said about the mixed waterfront overlay, because that's also very important to me. But as far as the 1 acre minimum lot goes, I do agree with Commissioner Steele and think that's just something we don't have any of, and a lot of other cities in Utah County also don't have this, so it could make us, unique in that we actually offer that, and it could make it a destination for people who are still wanting those larger lot sizes. Although Commissioner Cunningham makes a good point that the market right now may indicate that people want smaller homes, smaller yards, myself included. I do think that we would be remiss if we didn't keep this in here and at least have the opportunity for people who want this to have it.
Okay, so everybody's had a chance to speak. I'll hit the punch list a little bit. So I was here in 2014 when we visited this, and the proposed property was far away from utilities, and that's why you had the tanks, the septic tanks in there. And then the limiting factor really was the secondary water. That you'd have to have secondary water to be able to build on those. Time went by, and that expired. So, second thing, okay, the entrances. Absolutely, I support having more than one entrance for egress. And I mean, I can't imagine these people trying to get to work, and they're going to line up that whole road. I'd like to echo what Commissioner Chapman said with the lots 9, 10, 63, 138, 64, 122, that those entrances, the driveways should not go onto the road. I don't know what the road name is there, but the main entrance that you have proposed, if we were to go forward. 3, this also blocks off the lake completely. All these houses block it off, and really the only lake access is 10 parking spaces next to the park. So, and you're going to have Tecawayo coming in. These guys, they're going to have so many people. You said there isn't any traffic. Well, in the morning right now, I disagree with you. But also, when Tecawayo comes in, I'm telling you, you're going to have all the traffic you want, more than you need. And we'll be widening Redwood Road again. Amenities, it looks like there's minimal amenities. If I lived here, I'd want to know where are my children going to play, and I'd like to know where that place is, because I have 6 of them and I want them out of my home. So So hopefully we can get some kind of product that would allow for these, I mean, most of these people are going to have families, especially smaller lots, they're going to be having young children, and there's got to be a place for them to go, so. Having said all that, I struggled when we created the mixed waterfront, because I didn't like the idea of the city dictating what landowners would do with their property. And it's not that they're dictating it, and it's not they're not taking away the rights of landowners either. But it's what we did as part of the general plan, and it's a way that we can all enjoy the lake that's right here. And if we keep building everything as a big wall, nobody's going to be able to enjoy it. And it's such a wonderful amenity. Views are not protected, so we're not going to be able to see it if people build houses in front of it or grow trees that are abnormally tall. Don't have any experience there. So I would support something that goes along the lines of supporting a mixed waterfront. You're going to have a lot of demand for commercial down there, and there's not even a gas station. There's not a place to buy gum. You're going to need something down there. So
I think part of the discussion on mixed waterfront too, when you talk about property rights, is the intent was to actually grant people the opportunity for additional sources of revenue through commercial or whatever else, in order to offset, the development, the sort of public amenities that may occur with that. So, I think there was a real attempt not just to say, this is waterfront area, you can't touch it, but you could actually do more that could be profitable if you were to develop it in mixed waterfront.
right. So I think we've all spoken our piece. Any other comments?
Of course. When you say that so much would be put aside for commercial, have you looked at what the mixed waterfront and the density that you get some density bonuses down if you keep that?
Yeah, me and Dave actually had a conversation about this, and actually the way that it's written is, and this is maybe a question back to the commission. I know that in my discussions with staff on this, really the difference between this plan and entering in the mixed waterfront is a commercial pad from 10 square feet up to 2¼ acres to get 2 units per acre. There really is very little difference beyond that. In other words, it doesn't secure you any more amenities. It doesn't necessarily, in a drastic way, I mean. It doesn't secure you any more lake access. It doesn't change trails going to the lake compared to what I'm showing right now on the plan. All it does is really enter in the commercial pad and change the density of the area that's in the overlay zone. But there isn't a lot of what I've heard tonight. I don't think that the mixed waterfront truly addresses that, unless I'm just completely reading it wrong. But that's the way that my study of it was.
Well, I've got it here in front of me. And yes, there would be more access to the lake, and at least visually, there's some examples that are given in another area from where I am, but I'm torn, and I'll just put it this way. If we keep the rural residential, we then don't get the mixed waterfront. If we go and we change the zoning, the only way I could do it is to keep the mixed waterfront and then grant the R1 10,000 on the west side. My feeling is that you're in here about 2 months early. I hate to make any kind of decision tonight because we don't know what the sewer situation is. And I would not want to put the council in a situation where you're going to say, but we're here, we want it. And maybe it wouldn't make sense to give it to you, the extra capacity. It may need to go somewhere else. And until that is decided, I don't see how we can really, I know you want a condition that upon the sewer. I would entertain just the thought of tabling this until the sewer issue is resolved.
So,
Once that's resolved, then we know what we're dealing with. You know what you're dealing with.
We don't really wait to rezone until we record a plat anyway, so we know what we're getting.
Well, we've given negative recommendations for even little things like we don't know how tall the light's supposed to be or something, where the code was still not decided. And so I think this is a much bigger issue when we're talking about sewer capital, the sewer capital plan. If it's going to be done in the next month or so, then why not wait? I agree with you.
well,
I think I've talked with the applicant about a number of different alternatives, because I suspected there would be some resistance to making the mixed waterfront go away. And they felt strongly that this is the plan that they wanted to move forward with, and they wanted a hearing before the Planning Commission. So there were some other ways we could have gone with it, with work sessions and so on and so forth, but they specifically requested that this be put on the agenda in this form. So it's really, I mean, if they really want a decision, they have a right to ask for that, but they may be willing to look at a continuance as well. I don't know.
well, it seems that this is what they've asked for, and so we make a decision on what kind of recommendation we submit, and I think, based upon the conversation, we're going to forward a negative recommendation, and then they can come back and revise their plan, do whatever they want to do, and if they do that after the sewer, great. If not, we can look at it at that point.
I'd like to ask the applicants, Ben and Mike, in the event that we were to put forward a positive recommendation, you wouldn't be able to break ground until the sewer situation is taken care of. But I want to know the difference for you. What would be the difference for your organization if you had a positive recommendation and you were granted the rezone versus not? What's the difference to you, because you still can't break ground?
I think that, and I'm going to answer, I don't think exactly the question you're asking, but really similar one. I think right now, today, the difference for us is whether we end up with a commercial pad or not. Honestly, I think that's the question we're looking for today. Whether or not we are tabled, regardless of a commercial pad or not, it's just a matter of time for us. We don't, once the sewer issue is resolved, we just want to break ground that day. We don't want to then be coming back and figuring out what the city wants and address new requirements. We want to address the requirements and what there is today and be ready as soon as the sewer is resolved, because we feel very strongly that the sewer is a resolved issue. Technically, it's just a matter of getting the city council to review and approve it.
So in your opening statements, you mentioned that you might be amenable to a commercial and also that you wanted to go without the commercial, but that you could go forward with it.
We're amenable to a commercial. I mean, frankly, we're at a little bit of a loss. We're open to the idea. It's up to 2.2 acres. We just don't know exactly
What to do?
What we would do that would be beneficial to our community that we're building here and be beneficial to the Saratoga Springs community as a whole. We're not opposed to it. I mean, obviously, if we can get commercial, I mean, commercial benefits us. Commercial is always more valuable than residential. We just don't know what to do with it, and everybody that we've spoken to doesn't want it at this point. So right now, it looks like if that's what the city wants, unless somebody can come up with a better proposal for us or a better idea of what to do with it, it's a commercial pad that we wait until the market sustains it, and then we make more money.
I think that if they were to be okay with moving forward with the mixed waterfront zoning, there are lots of alternatives we could explore in terms of uses, and I think it could potentially be more than just a commercial pad that's proposed. I think there are other things in the mixed waterfront zone that could provide an amenity to them and an amenity. So, you know, what the request is right now and what it was noticed for was a change to RR or R110 only. So if there's some, you know, if they want to come back and modify that, they can certainly draw at this point, or they can ask you for a recommendation, and then they can move forward based upon that recommendation. I would be uncomfortable probably with you making a recommendation to rezone it to mixed waterfront and R110, because that's not what the request was initially.
Well, and also, when the applicant says that, well, there's only really just, it's just the 2.2 acres, and it's really not that different. Well, the way I hear that is, well, then if it's not that different, then why aren't you okay with just leaving it the way it is? Because then we don't have to do an amendment, we don't have to do a rezone. It's only 2.2 acres. So the argument that you make about that, I see it, I flip it to the other side and say that, okay, then if it's only that, then it shouldn't be that big a deal for you guys either. So, whereas we're the ones, we have to make amendments and not follow, I mean, it's the advisory general plan as well as our city what is it, the motto, or the thing about, we spent a lot of time figuring out what our city, vision statement is and all that. So I think it's more of a change for us if it's really not that big a deal as you yourself had said, so.
I do think they're struggling with the idea of a marketable commercial lot, though. I can hear that.
If it were purely a commercial lot, I would agree with you. One of the challenges that we've had, especially since we've implemented the mixed waterfront zone, is everybody just keeps going back to view lots. They treat it as a view lot and as a view amenity rather than fully embrace what I think the whole concept of this zoning designation is, which is how do we as a community embrace the lake and make it part of who we are and what we are, which could include a whole variety of things, not just, we're not looking for a convenience store. We're looking for a whole layout and a whole concept that embraces the lake and makes it so much more than just, houses that back onto the lake that have great views and a trail on the backside of those homes. And so I think that that's kind of the concept that this zoning is trying to inspire, and it's a challenge to do.
I just wanted to make it clear, though, that maybe you didn't interpret what I was saying. I understand what their position is, but I still support the mixed waterfront. Did you want to say something? Okay, we had one other comment from our
So just
city
a
council.
couple legal points. First is, Nora is correct. Their request is to rezone the property, so it's either a yes or no type. You can attach conditions to that, sure, but you can't just unilaterally say, well, it stays mixed lakeshore. You just reject it. They can come back, they can revise their application and come back. There's so many factors that would go into that. How would you, what do you zone it as if you keep the mixed lakeshore designation on it?
There's considerable differences.
Other questions that go into it and a lot more discussions that the planning commission would have to entertain. But really at this point, it's kind of a yes or no type thing.
Right.
Another thing too is the Land Use Development and Management Act in the state code talks about timely processing applications, and it sort of expects a 45-day time frame for processing an application, getting a decision from the Land Use Authority. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, this is a recommendation on a legislative decision, so you have a lot of discretion on that. The standard that a court would look at is whether or not it was reasonably debatable that it could promote the welfare. That's a very broad standard. Possible reason that it could benefit the general welfare will satisfy. And then one last thought too is you can also, like I said, you could attach certain conditions. So when there's a rezone of property, they talked about, well, we'll meet all the code requirements in the R110 zone. That's to be expected. That's what they would have to do anyway. When you rezone property, you can ask for additional conditions that you wouldn't otherwise be able to require in the code. For instance, if you're looking to preserve the lakeshore area, you could ask for additional dedication of open space, additional amenities, public amenities where the public could access the lake. And so those are things that you're basically what it is. It's sort of the consideration the city's giving is by rezoning the property, making, according to the applicant, more marketable. Of course, that's debatable. I know that there is a huge demand for 1 acre lots in the city. In fact, several of my neighbors have expressed interest in the 1 acre lots here. Of course, the preliminary plat's expired, but
I wanted one.
But it is debatable whether or not it's more marketable, but as a condition of that rezone, we're giving up something, we're giving up the rural residential zone. They could also be required to give up additional amenities or develop additional amenities as a condition of that rezone. That would be tied into a development agreement that we would. So anyway, those are the thoughts that I had. I would recommend that you make a motion tonight, recommending up or down. If you want to attach conditions, feel free to discuss that as a planning commission as well.
I think we've spoken enough. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we forward a negative recommendation to the City Council for the general plan amendment and rezone with the findings and below.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second. Is there a question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5. This is a public hearing. It's a preliminary plat for Fox Hollow N5, located approximately 3200 South Village Parkway. Doug Towler is the applicant, and we'll turn the time over to our senior planner, Sarah Carroll, for the presentation.
So the Fox Hollow development is in the southern portion of the city, as indicated by the circle on this map. And then more specifically, it's in between Wildlife Boulevard and Village Parkway. And it's just east of what will be a future 20-acre park in the city, or not east, west of, and west of the Sage Hills Elementary School. So one of the requirements in the Fox Hollow development is open space requirements, and they don't have to develop within their project boundaries or within their plat boundaries. That they can select from, or not can, they're required to select from designated open space areas within the Fox Hollow development. So what you're seeing here is a quick summary of the areas they are proposing to improve with landscaping. Some of those areas are formerly landscaped and others are native areas with a trail. This is the open space calculation. The number you see in green is a contribution they make towards the regional park, the 20-acre park that I mentioned. This covers water costs, and down the road the city is obligated to improve the park. The acreage that you're seeing in yellow is what they're required for neighborhood 5, so 5.36 total acres. Within the Fox Hollow development, they can choose from different classifications of open space, and they get different credits for those. So that some of the monetary figures that you're seeing here are strictly just to calculate the acreage. They're not actual costs. There are some variations being requested. Those are highlighted in yellow here. So a front yard of 20 feet, a rear yard of 20 feet, sides of 5 feet, and a corner side of 15 feet. There's also variations to a couple other things, and those are in the staff report. So the minimum lot size and I believe the lot width. And then there's 6 phases proposed in neighborhood 5. This is the phasing plan, and then there's a plat proposed for each of those phases. So here's a close-up of the same phasing plan, and then it's just changed directions. For reference, it says Alpine School District here, so that's where the elementary school is located. And so you'll see several sheets with plats and then some landscaping included as well in the packet. Let me get to the landscaping. This right here is a proposed option for a parking lot. One of the things that is happening in this phase is some land is being dedicated to the city to create a parking lot for the future park. And then that won't be the only parking lot. There's other parking lots planned in the master plan for the park. So the Redwood Road Trail is being planned and designed and will be installed with this particular development. All of the landscaping and open space that you're seeing here will be done with the first phase in neighborhood 5. And there's one thing I wanted to point out. The HOA had a question. At the entrance to the Fox Hollow development, there's a large monument sign on one corner, and they were wondering who will be building it on the other corner, and if it will be this applicant, since they're improving the landscaping on this particular corner of Redwood and Village Parkway that you see at the top of the page. There is not specific direction called out in the development agreement. I did double check and see, so it is a good question who that obligation could be. It could fall on this developer, since they are improving this corner. I mean, that makes sense that it would be an obligation of whoever improves this particular corner. The other consideration is that it could be the obligation of the neighborhood 4 developer. And the HOA had a question about, let's see here, there's some pathways in between some lots. Here you go. So there's 3 of these, and there are pedestrian connections between lots to trail corridors, and then 2 of these lead to trail corridors, and 1 of them leads to an abutting neighborhood. So at the bottom on the key map there, TC1 and 2 lead to a trail corridor, and then TC3 leads to neighborhood 2. To a little section of open space in neighborhood 2, so it provides connection between neighborhoods. And the HOA responded that other trails of this nature have shrubs and grasses, and they would like to see that as well. I had asked that they coordinate, and I don't know if that was lost in communication or if they hadn't been able to coordinate or not. This is a typical fencing. Fencing is required adjacent to open space, so you'll see it along these particular sections, and then there's some lots backing some of these open space areas, and fencing will be required in those locations. And then we have the landscape legend. Because they're in a PUD, we're required to review elevations. These were reviewed by the Development Review Committee, and then they're included in the packet. They were also sent to the HOA ahead of time. The developer that has this under contract is Ivory, and this is, there's several samples of their product included in the packet, and those have been reviewed by the HOA. The HOA also has an architectural control committee with specific point requirements for their elevations, and so they would review each elevation. There is a recommendation for approval subject to conditions in the staff report, and specifically, they do need their own entry monument as well. That's included in the master development agreement. And then 2 things I wanted to mention here. Number 6, that the variations are recommended as proposed, if you agreed to those. And then that plants be added to parcels A, B, and C, and they could coordinate with the HOA on that. And then any other items that might come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is the applicant here? Like to come and join us? Gary? I'm sorry, Gordon.
Excuse me, could I add a couple of things before we get to that?
Sure.
So, we've been looking at this application, particularly the water pressure zones. The pressure zones cut across this subdivision diagonally. So I would just ask, as the Planning Commission considers this further, that they add the condition that the pressure zones are subject to the city engineer's direction on that. And then one more thing, one of the comments we had on this set of plans is the parking lot that Sarah showed here, that triangular parking lot. I've had some discussions with the applicant about this, and it's my understanding they want to talk about it. But just so you know, the grading that I've seen for that parking lot, it's not feasible at this point. So just wanted to add those 2 items.
Before you sit down, could you show us where the pressure zones cut across? Could you show us on the map?
Do I have a pointer? Does this have a laser on it? Oh, maybe let me just grab your cursor. Oh, no, just go to the presentation of their layout.
Did you get the note that you wanted? Yeah.
That's good. The other, that was. Yeah, so if you could see my. So, you know, the pressure zones are going to cut diagonally through. Pressure zone boundary, cut diagonally through. And that may, so it's not a feasibility issue, it's just a matter of where we put it, and it will affect their phasing. I want to make sure that.
Is it going to need some kind of easement? What's going to be necessary there?
Okay, so to repeat what I was saying, the pressure zone boundary cuts diagonally through the project. It's not a feasibility issue, it's just a matter of getting it in the right place. And then the other thing is, wherever that lands, that might affect their phasing. What was your question? Easement? No, it's just a matter of where the boundary between an upper pressure zone in the water system and a lower pressure zone in the water system are.
So it's zoning. For planning purposes, it's zoning.
No, we're talking about public services, the pressures in the water systems.
Right.
Yeah, so it's an elevation. So what we're looking at is what elevation can be served and what can't be served. And so that apparently is still being looked at by engineering. So we don't know exactly how many lots, if all of them can be served or if all of them can't be served at this point in time.
And actually, it's not about what can be served, it's just a matter of which zones they're served in.
Okay.
It's just the boundary.
Yeah, we have a Zone 3 and a Zone 2. It's just, from an efficiency standpoint, we don't want to take Zone 3 water, pump it twice up to that
Right.
zone.
It's about gravity.
And lose it, where if we can take it out of Zone 2, it's more efficient and it loops and it's all that. It's
Okay, so it can
pretty
be
straightforward
served if
engineering.
it's where it connects. Okay.
Finally, we'd like to introduce our applicants. Could you tell us who you are and state your address for the record?
Doug Toller with Cardinal Land, 999 Murray Holiday Road, Suite 101, Salt Lake City.
Matt Scott with SCP Fox Hollow, 1148 West Legacy Crossing Boulevard, Centerville.
Thank you. Matt and Doug, would you like to add anything to the presentation today?
Yeah, we just thank staff for the work that they've done on this project. It's been a very complicated project, all the way from mounds of dirt, understanding how to use that dirt, all the way through to the parking lot, and we're finally in a position where we think we've got an excellent product for the city, for Fox Hollow, and for the future residents. So I think the staff has done a great job working with this. We're looking for a positive recommendation, understanding that for the final plat, there's a couple of things that we will need to work out, and we appreciate the time. Like Sarah said, Ivory Homes has this under contract, and they will take over the process as soon as the preliminary plat is approved, and the final details as the plats are recorded will be worked out with Ivory. So we just appreciate your time and look forward to a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this is a public hearing, so we'd like to open up public comment now for item number 5, preliminary plat for Fox Hollow, N5. And as you come forward, please state your name and address for the record, and if you could keep your comments to about 3 minutes, that'd be great. Is your mic on?
It's
Okay,
not.
Sorry, could you do that again? Sorry.
Oh, that was long. Fine, I'll do it
Tanya
again.
Parker.
Anya Parker, yes. President of the Villages at Saratoga Springs HOA, address 2833 Cottontail Loop. The HOA is here to support Neighborhood 5 project. We have worked extensively with the developers on this. We feel like it would be a very suitable product for our HOA, in the sense that we're finally seeing some nicer, bigger lots coming in. So we're very excited about that. Lately, we've had a lot of smaller lots in our HOA, so we welcome the larger lots coming in. We appreciate you guys' willingness to give us that. We also appreciate the willingness to work with us on a couple of those things that Sarah mentioned. such as the entrance sign and the neighborhood signs and the landscaping in the trails, that we believe we can easily work with the developer and reach an agreement that will be suitable for both parties. And anything else, just want to make sure that this neighborhood gets to move forward, because I know they've been anxious and excited to get going on this for a while. So we feel like it will be a good move. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, we will close public comment on item number 5, and we'll open it up to the Planning Commission for discussion. But before we do, Gordon, you had mentioned in your comments that the grading for the parking lot was not feasible. Do you have any suggestions or direction?
May I say something before he speaks?
Sure.
I'm sorry, Gordon, I didn't mean to.
You are the applicant. Please go forward.
Cut you off, but under the master development agreement, we're not obligated to design or deliver this parking lot. We've worked with staff, and we think we found a favorable way to create 85 parking spots in that area, and that's by producing a combination of dedicated land and land for sale to the city, which would be less than what the original city request was from us. So I just want the staff to and the council to understand that the park is not, or the parking lot is not our obligation. We want to work with the city to figure out what is best, not only for the subdivision of Fox Hollow, but for the parking lot and for the residents. And so we felt that this was a solution that not only we could live with, but was a very good solution for the city by creating that dedication and for sale property for the parking.
Thank you, Mr. Toller.
So I don't know what solution he's referring to. All I'm referring to is the engineering, and the engineering that we were shown for that triangular piece doesn't work. And had that discussion with the applicant. They felt strongly about bringing it to the Planning Commission anyway, and therefore I'm obligated to tell you what was put in the package and delivered to me doesn't work.
Is it the grading?
Correct.
Okay, and what's the percentage grading right now? Or proposed?
Much greater than a parking lot. I can't remember what.
Okay. Thank you. Planning Commission? Commissioner Steele looks like she's ready. Hold on.
I'm sorry that we don't have anybody from Ivory Homes here tonight.
Excuse me, we do have someone from Ivory Homes.
Okay, good. The one thing I've noticed is that when we have the smaller backyards, that all of a sudden the street side of the backs of those homes begins to look monotonous. And I can't require it, but I'm going to ask very nicely if you would add shutters or some kind of architectural interest to the back of those homes that back up to a street, so that there is some interest there. It's not all the same. And I think that's all I have to say.
Are you sure? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We've worked together a long time, so.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Can you explain the reasons for the setback variance request?
Based on the Ivory product catalog, they want to be able to produce multiple products as compared to one or two, and some of the lots in there are smaller, and so they want to be able to accommodate their product line.
All right, that was all I had, thanks.
Just a quick note on that, I think the staff report did a good job of addressing this, but variations are kind of a carryover from the previous code. They're entitled to their density in the MDA, in the Master Development Agreement. So that's just really kind of a formality at this point. You might want to touch on them briefly as far as if you don't, you have to, I guess what you need to do is you need to make sure that they get their density, but you may be able to discuss adjusting some of those variations if you like, oh, this front yard setback is too much. In other words, there's some give and take. It's an entitlement to get the density. Variations have to be granted. There'd be some discussion with the applicant about where and how those variations will take place.
So this being an administrative action, and you're saying that then the MDA takes precedence over the code? If we don't make any comment about it, then even though the setbacks aren't in agreement with the code, the MDA takes precedence because of the density?
It does, yeah. But there's a way to make it consistent as well, because the code does allow those variations to take place. But at the end of the day, the Master Development Agreement would take precedence over any conflicting code provisions.
So I have some questions. You're done?
Go ahead, Commissioner Kilgore.
Okay.
Take it.
So I do have an issue with the, I guess, well, I wanted to ask, actually, we have a corner lot setback requirement of 25 feet, and I think the applicant wants to reduce it to 15 feet. So I was wondering, that's a 10-foot difference.
That's normally 20.
Oh, is it 20?
Corner side is normally 20.
I wrote down from
and they're
25. For the corner, it's 20?
It's normally 20.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's a 25% reduction then. Is that safe? I mean, what was the reason for 20? I thought it was for safety reasons, and I didn't know if there's an issue with reducing it by 25%. In that case.
Not that I'm aware of.
I would like to point out, when we did something like this in Legacy Farms, we did start to experience, in some cases, utility challenges,
Right.
because there's a certain setback from those utilities. So that's just something that we do look for. But does 15 foot give us enough?
The applicant's aware of it. It's been brought up to them several times.
Okay. Because you have to be back, I think it's 10 feet from a gas line.
Right.
And 10 feet from a power line. So there's, that will somewhat dictate how much they actually can do because of the footprint of the building where those utilities naturally will reside in those locations.
Right, and I've had lengthy conversations with them about that, and they have assured me they will coordinate with the power and gas.
Okay, so I guess in that situation, I have an issue with the corner setback, because I think if we just keep it at 20, like the code says, then there wouldn't be any issue. You wouldn't have to coordinate, you wouldn't have to do any of that, right? Because the 20 is for sure safe. I mean,
Right,
and by safe, I mean not just traffic safe, but I mean safe to go, good to go.
Right, right. So the issue that Mark Christensen discussed was that it was an installation issue, because generally the power line goes right next to the sidewalk, and then the gas line goes at the other end of the easement, so as far from the power line as possible. And the easement is 10 feet, and they have to be 10 feet from the home. And so they drew up their plans to switch them and everything, but the installers are so used to putting them in those locations that even though the plans had something different, they thought the plans were wrong.
Yeah.
And so they had to resolve that, because so in this situation, if there's not close coordination with the plans and the installers and project managers, there's likely going to be an error. If it's at 20 feet, it eliminates that concern.
Okay, and what you're talking about, those examples you're giving, that's specific to corner lots?
That was specific to a 15-foot setback.
Or a corner lot?
I don't know if it was a corner
Oh, okay,
lot.
because then that calls into question the entire request for a variance on all the setbacks, right? Okay, well, I guess my concern is mostly with the corner lot. Okay.
So one thing that the city does do, law requires us to notify the utility companies of a plat. We take it one step further, we require them to sign the plat. What they do in return is they put this giant disclaimer on the plat, which is another issue for another day, but not only are they aware of this issue, will they be aware of this issue, but they will have a chance to look at the plat, handle the plat, and sign the plat.
Who does
All the utility companies.
Oh, okay.
Rocky Mountain Power, Questar, Comcast. Did I miss any? Yeah, CenturyLink. So it's really interesting. It's a good conversation to have. I don't know if the applicant could speak to, could they fit some of the other, like I said, they're entitled to that density. Now the discussion is, you could have some discussions about the form of that density. Where exactly those setbacks are. Are there other variations to make up so they can get their vested density?
Well, I guess that's why I'm focusing just on the corner one. I mean, I thought of it as a safety issue, but I mean, there's a lot more involved. And if the answer that the applicant gave for the reason for the setback variance request is mainly because of the product, well, then if it's just corner lots, then maybe on corner lots, the product that's the product that's available for choice is just limited to ensuring that there's a 20-foot setback, just to avoid all these issues. I don't know if that's a realistic, if that's a possibility.
Process, it's like Kevin just described about back and forth. How we can have asking for right now. Positive recommendation for it. So start before you plan. Have this discussion. Sure that the lots are easy to properly. They're working with these people. So that's checks and balances. I agree, the appeal. Subdivision. Now, Fox Hollow, back to that small one. 5 is that spectacular views. It sits up a little bit higher on the hill. Variation. All the lots, corner lots. Recommend that high end or high. Not just setback, but
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I do understand, but again, the reason why we have the setback for the corner lot is because we have had experiences where what you just said wasn't done. Sometimes it just slips through the cracks. So I'm just saying that for corner lots, I'm not saying that I'm okay with, I actually don't like setback variance requests, but because it's an MDA, also there are other neighborhoods nearby that we granted those to. It's funny that people want larger home or larger lots, and yet they're okay, I guess, when the home takes over the entire lot practically as we reduce setbacks continuously. But that's, I'm okay with that. It's just a corner lot. And again, I asked the staff, and there have been actual cases where that kind of coordination slipped through the cracks. Well, this is one way to ensure that it doesn't. So that's why I asked the question.
Commissioner Kilgore?
Yes.
I would, and I tend to agree with you on this, and if you look at the elevations that they have presented to us, the very first one probably wouldn't fit on a corner lot.
Yeah.
But and there's a contemporary that seems to be a little wider, but they've got some products that are the traditional, looks like that it is a narrower footprint. And so I would think that Ivory Homes could juggle what products they put on, and they have a variety. There's not just one that could fit on it, that they could fit some of their product on a corner lot with a 20-foot.
That's what I figured as well, because there's so many examples here of the product, and I thought that there were, I mean, as you say, Ivory Homes could go back and negotiate with, or look at and redesign whatever has to be done. Well, setback's one of them. And again, if it's just for the corner lots, I don't see if that's going to be that big an issue. But anyway, let me just move on. Where is the nearest park that's park or non-trail open space in this development?
There's a trail that goes in the
non-trail open space.
Just up off of Village Parkway.
So is that
just above it on Village Parkway? It's an HOA park.
Oh, that park. That's right. Okay.
Right. This is an HOA park right here.
It's what?
This is an HOA park.
Yeah. So
a couple of blocks away, and it's quite a nice one.
HOA. So does that prohibit residents of this parcel from using it then?
No, they can all use it.
They're part of the same HOA.
They're same HOA. Okay. All right. Okay.
Also, there's another park on the other side. It's what, neighborhood 10?
There's
neighborhood
one
11.
right here.
Yeah, just across the street, neighborhood 11, and then you've got the school right below with plenty of green space as well. So there's a lot of green space in that area. It's very well designed.
Okay. And then on your sprinkler page, I didn't notice anything about rain sensing sprinklers. Is that something that you're planning to install?
I did check for that. It's
Okay.
all of the call outs include, oh wait, sorry, I checked for pressure reducing valves. Sorry, will you answer that question? I will check for that.
It's part of our code.
Yeah, it's part of the code. That's why I asked.
It's per code, yes.
Okay.
It is.
That's all the questions for me.
Okay. Do you have any?
Well, I was just going to ask, so in the example, going back to the setbacks on the corner lot, my understanding from either it was Mark or someone that if we approved it with the 15 and they could not get it to comply with the utility, they just don't build a home there, right? I mean, essentially, they cannot build a home within the utility setbacks, even if we grant them the setback variance, correct?
They'd have to adjust their product. I mean, and Sarah's right, and I apologize. Sarah's right. It was, I think, a 10-foot setback in the other scenario that was there, not the 15-foot setback.
Were they able to build the homes and move forward in that situation? Were they going
ultimately, they just...
They had to reroute the utility lines.
Yeah, they had to adjust it so that it worked.
So it's not like essentially that becomes a check where if they can't make it work, then they have to make it work. I mean, it's not like they can just build and be like, well, we tried hard, but they just can't build it if they can't meet the setback requirements for the utilities. Okay.
Hayden, when I built my home, we had to go through 3 lots for the house that we wanted to make sure it met the setbacks before we could build it. So they've got plenty of lots, they could do something like that.
Any other comments from the planning commission? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I will do it if I can find it.
Can we discuss some of the potential conditions?
Yeah, so Sarah, could you give us a breakdown of the conditions that we need to address in this?
Okay.
There's a few variations requested.
Oh, yeah, I put a condition to cover all of it. The variations are recommended as proposed. Unless you don't want to recommend them as proposed.
That's up to the person making the motion. Yeah, so we had at the beginning, we had the pressure zone issue. What was the request on that? You wanted us to do what?
That they work with the city engineer.
Okay, the second one was.
They'd be determined by the city engineer. That
Second
pressure zone
one.
boundary.
Okay. Second one was the parking lot that was not feasible.
Yeah, so I don't know what the background is on why the parking lot shows up there. I'm not even sure. It's going to require a tall retaining wall on the east side.
Can we just say that the parking lot and the pressure zones, that they need to work with the city engineer, and would that cover that?
I don't know that the parking lot's feasible right there.
Which means they'd have to work with you and they couldn't do it if we did a condition like that, or find something that would work, right?
Open space.
Find a different place.
Well, so the applicant won't be designing the parking lot. They'll be dedicating that property to the city to be used towards the park. So if it's not feasible for parking, it's possible so it's intended to offer additional parking on the top of the park, because it's a sloped park, so there's parking at the bottom. It's intended to offer parking at the top of the park. If it's not feasible, it can still be incorporated into the park, or it's possible that, you could drive down a little bit and there could be a parking lot in an area that has slopes that make sense.
So dedicated snow.
So the design can be
Snow
handled
sledding.
later by the city.
So we don't even have to worry about that, because this can be dedicated to the city. It's not going to be part of their...
They're not designing it, no. And like I said, if it can't be used as a parking lot, it can still be used as part of the park.
So is that necessary for us to add as a condition?
I don't well, I think Gordon was bringing it up that the slopes shown on the grading plan don't allow that area to be feasible for a parking lot, which is good information for the city to have, but it doesn't need to be a condition.
Okay, and the third one was assign monuments, entrances, and trails. What do you need us to do on that?
For the sign, so their subdivision needs an entry monument. For the one to the HOA, I'd like to discuss that further with the applicants. They own, they have this area and another area under contract, and one of those, either Neighborhood 5 or Neighborhood 4, will carry that obligation. So I would like to discuss that with them and see which neighborhood they would like to have that obligation. Then we can tie it to either one, either Neighborhood 5 or Neighborhood 4.
Give us some language for the condition.
That the entry monument be completed with either Neighborhood 4 or Neighborhood 5.
Did you get that, Commissioner Williams?
I'm writing it here. Monument. Say that again, Sarah.
That the entry, so that the Fox Hollow entry monument be completed with either Neighborhood 4 or Neighborhood 5, and that Neighborhood 5 have its own entry monument.
And Neighborhood 5 have its own monument?
Right.
You have all those? Sounds like there's
and then
4
also
conditions.
the rain sensing sprinklers. We need to have that added.
That's fine.
course,
It is a code
it's also
requirement,
part of code.
and they still have to go through final plat, so we will be reviewing. So it doesn't have to be a condition, but you can add it.
Yeah, it's not necessary because it's part of the code. Okay?
Wasn't there something about plants on that the HOA requested specific plants on the trail? Is that?
That's right. They
I
wanted
added that one up
bushes
here as
and
number
grasses.
7.
What kind of grasses are we talking about? Are we talking about natural grasses?
Always
Ornamental. Okay, so there's a difference between ornamental and natural. Natural includes weeds.
Basically, rather than just the mulch, the HOA has requested that we put some shrubs and plants along those walkways just to spruce them up and make them look a little bit better than just having the mulch there.
It'll also keep the mulch from blowing away in our city.
True.
It does. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
All right. Based upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for approval of the Fox Hollow Neighborhood Preliminary Plat, or Fox Hollow Neighborhood 5 Preliminary Plat located at approximately 3200 South Village Parkway with the findings and conditions below, including that pressure zones be designed with coordination of the city engineer, that an entry monument be completed with either Neighborhood 4 or Neighborhood 5, and that Neighborhood 5 have its own entry monument, and that rain sensing sprinklers be included in the plan.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have a second? Do we have a question on the motion?
I have a question. Is the pressure zone subject in collaboration, or is they just subject to the city engineer? I don't know that the applicant really
As determined by the city engineer, please.
As determined by the
Rather
city
than in
engineer.
collaboration with the applicant.
Yeah. The pressure zones be designed as determined by the city engineer.
We have that.
Based on
I agree with that.
regulations.
Did you want to add that?
But
Yes.
Based upon engineering regulations. And does our second agree?
Agree.
Last question, we didn't add in the bushes and the ornamental grasses. Did you get that on there? That is on there?
7.
So it's part of the...
Okay, I'll resend my question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Great.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, given that we are so close to ending, we will just crank through the rest of this. So, I am entertaining a motion for the approval of minutes on September 14th, 2017.
I move that, well, I can't do that, never mind.
Yes, you will.
I move to approve the minutes from September
14th,
14th,
2017.
2017.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Cunningham, I'll take that as the second. Any question on the motion? What do you say? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have 2 abstains, Commissioner Chapman and Commissioner Williamson. Okay, reports of action.
Let's see, City Council, well, no reports of action, but council action, City Council last week did approve those changes to the utilities, things like that, which then subsequently they didn't follow your recommendation. They did, of course, had to deny them the AT&T cell tower. They are looking to go elsewhere, and I think they've got some locations in mind to relocate that proposed tower. Of course, they did approve the Pond 8 there in Evans Lane, so that's approved. Had several other items there, not necessarily planning related, but I don't know if Mark wanted to touch on any of those, but those are the main things that you've looked at in the past that they then approved or in some case denied.
Okay.
Can I ask what was the result of the fence discussion?
Chain link will now be allowed. There are some parameters with that though, but it can be an option now.
For what purposes?
Around utilities areas.
Okay,
like
I just
that.
didn't want to people to think that the chain link is allowed everywhere.
With the vinyl coating or just?
Vinyl coated, yes.
Vinyl coated.
For utilities.
Yeah.
Okay.
The planning commission had recommended so it can be allowed next to a street, but it has to have a 5-foot setback.
Okay, thank you. Commission comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
What department takes care of, well, number one, can you just dump bark mulch, dirt, gravel in the middle or in front of a house on city pavement?
No.
Who takes care of enforcing that?
Probably would be Public Works.
Actually, no, just call code enforcement.
It's dangerous.
So that would be a, there's, it would be a violation of the city's stormwater management plan.
So Gordon's volunteering to take it, so hand it off to him.
Well, I'm
Just saying that's where the teeth are, the city stormwater management plan.
Yeah.
Use the driveway.
That's what I think, but there's a slalom course on Jubilee where people have put that.
Gordon will take a look at that tomorrow.
Are you talking about the rock basket?
Monday, please.
No, I think it's people have landscaping dropped, items dropped off of their house, so they can put it in their yard.
Get high.
They'll just dump it in the street.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's, one of those piles was taller than I am. Yes, it is. No, it's high.
So here's what we'll do, Sandy, thank you for bringing that up. Gordon will either himself or have his engineers tomorrow communicate with code enforcement and ask PD to also start looking out and enforcing that throughout the city. But specifically on Jubilee, they'll go take a look at that.
And on Maverick.
And on Maverick.
At Fairway.
Do you want to give an address? I'm just kidding, I'm kidding.
That's about it.
Sounds like you're ready. GPS coordinates.
Commissioner, so what was the material that was placed there?
Was it
It's
probably
landscaping for
bark or
people's
rock or
yards.
just landscape material?
There was topsoil on Jubilee.
Okay, so
And-
landscaping materials, huh?
Right, and mulch of some sort, and they've got equipment that doesn't have, or have had equipment that didn't have a truck in front of it, and they had
And these are the streets, Jubilee, Maverick, and Fairway?
Maverick at Fairway.
Oh. Okay.
The backyard is looking nice, though. Sorry, I drive by it every day.
You know what
I
you're
talking
about.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be done, and I wasn't gonna say anything, but it's gone on for over 2 weeks now.
The trees look nice, too. But they're going to block the view of the other people. We don't. Anyway. All right, any other commission comments? Director's report.
Let's see, just bringing up some new items as well here. The Sierra Estates have submitted their concept plan, or their site plan. It'll be a conditional use. It's a little different than this. The senior living building is kind of more centrally located, but they'll still have some of the same elements, single family, some side-by-side, and then the main unit, assisted living facility there. That is a conditional use permit, so that'll then go on to the city council, but we're now in the process of reviewing this plan. So you'll see that at some point here in the future. We also get an application for the corner parcel at Pioneer Crossing in Redwood. They're proposed to have 2 buildings on that corner parcel. And so that is actually a staff approval in that instance, so you will not see that site plan. That community plan, village plan allows staff to approve that, those site plans. The northwest corner.
Is the density of that, is the zoning density, did they have to go through a rezone to increase the density of that?
No, that is R, I believe, R6, excuse.
Used to be.
So, yeah. So, those are some of the big ones that come in. We've had some other ones, subdivisions, things like that, but these are some of the larger ones.
All right, thank you. Without objection, we adjourn.
What is the work session on?
Excuse me?
What's the work session next?
Sarah's going to do that on Simplify. I guess she's had drafted for a while. She's going to send it back for.
Okay.
Have a subdivision for individuals.
Okay, I just wanted to know, I've got our son